What if I told you that the electric vehicle revolution didn't start with Tesla, didn't come from China, and didn't require deep pockets? What if the next global EV disruption was born not in Silicon Valley, but on the streets of London? Today, the UK has pulled off the unthinkable, unveiling a fully functional electric car priced at just $6,399. That's cheaper than most smartphones over a 2-year plan, and less than the cost of a mid-range bicycle in some cities. And now, the entire auto industry is in panic mode, asking the same question. How on earth did they build a real electric car for the price of a second-hand scooter? Stay with me, because the answer is even more shocking. Meet the Whirly City, a compact, ultra-efficient urban vehicle designed for one purpose: to make electric driving accessible to everyone. It's not a concept. It's not a prototype. It's real, road legal, and already rolling out across the UK. Top speed, 50 miles per hour, perfect for city commutes. Range, up to 120 miles on a single charge. Charging time, just 3 hours from a regular household socket. Size, small enough to park sideways in tight urban spots. This isn't just a car, it's freedom packaged in 500 kilograms of innovation. Now you're probably thinking, this must be cheap junk. But here's the twist. It's not. The manufacturer achieved this breakthrough through white heavy checkmark modular engineering. No complex dashboard electronics. White heavy checkmark standardized battery packs. Interchangeable across multiple models. White heavy checkmark recycled aluminum frame. Lightweight yet sturdy. White heavy checkmark direct-to-consumer manufacturing. Cutting dealerships out of the equation. Instead of loading the vehicle with expensive features most drivers never use, they build it with a laser focus on simplicity, utility, and efficiency. And now, the world is watching. In Germany, automakers are lobbying for higher safety regulations, clearly worried about competition. In China, micro-EV manufacturers are rushing to release even cheaper models. In the U.S., analysts are already calling this the Model T moment of the electric era. When Henry Ford released a Model T in 1908, he didn't build the fastest or most luxurious car. He built the most affordable one. And that changed history. This UK-made $6,399 EV might just be the Model T of our time. Or is this just a clever gimmick that big auto companies will quietly bury? But beneath the excitement lies a looming question. What happens when transportation becomes this cheap? Imagine cities once choked with noisy buses and petrol scooters suddenly filled with silent, compact EVs gliding effortlessly through narrow streets. Picture low-income families, students, delivery riders, even retirees, all suddenly able to afford private mobility without breaking the bank. No fuel stations, no oil changes, no constant maintenance headaches. Just plug into a wall socket, wait a few hours, and go. If widely adopted, it could collapse public transport subscriptions, disrupt ride-hailing services, and even devalue traditional used cars overnight. Dealerships would struggle, insurance models would have to evolve, and governments might scramble to impose new regulations just to catch up. And let's not forget the environmental impact. If hundreds of thousands of these tiny EVs replace short commutes that were previously done on diesel cars or motorbikes, the air quality of major cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham could transform almost instantly. Noise pollution would vanish. Congestion could shrink thanks to smaller footprints and modular charging hubs. But while citizens cheer, traditional automakers tremble. Because once consumers realize that mobility doesn't have to cost $30,000, the illusion of overpriced tech-filled SUVs collapses. This isn't just an affordable EV. This is a declaration of independence from expensive transportation. A quiet revolution, one socket charge at a time. And as the first batch of these ultra-affordable EVs quietly hit UK streets, experts warn that this may only be the beginning. Because if one company can crack the $6,399 price point, what's stopping others from going even lower? Rumors are already circulating that a Chinese startup is preparing a $4,999 competitor, while an Indian manufacturer is reportedly testing an EV that charges itself through solar body panels, eliminating even the need for electricity costs altogether. Suddenly, transportation is no longer just about engines and batteries. It's turning into a software-style price war, where innovation moves at the speed of smartphones rather than the sluggish pace of traditional automakers. And that's where things get truly unpredictable. What happens when these vehicles start connecting to AI-based traffic systems, forming self-organizing swarms that reduce congestion without government oversight? What happens when subscription-based battery swaps make refueling faster than filling petrol? Or when neighborhoods begin forming community-owned microgrids to power shared fleets, cutting corporations out entirely? For the first time in over a century, the power balance in transportation is shifting away from manufacturers and straight into the hands of ordinary people. And while legacy car makers scramble to defend their territory with marketing campaigns and fine-print regulations, one thing has already become crystal clear. Mobility is no longer a luxury. It is becoming a human right. And it all started with a tiny electric car that dared to be cheap. The only real question now is, will governments embrace this new freedom or try to control it? Because make no mistake, the moment affordability threatens profit, those who stand to lose will not sit quietly. Already, whispers are spreading through financial circles that powerful lobbying groups are preparing to classify these micro-EVs as unsafe or unfit for highways, not because they truly lack safety, but because their low price threatens to unravel decades of carefully engineered consumer dependency. Oil companies, whose revenue streams rely on millions of daily fuel stops, now face the nightmare scenario of people charging cars at home for pennies. Insurance giants are concerned too, because cheaper, slower, lighter EVs statistically cause fewer accidents, cutting into premium payouts. Even local councils that profit from parking fines and congestion fees could see their income disrupted as these micro EVs fit into tight spaces and slip through outdated enforcement systems. But if history has taught us anything, it's that innovation always faces resistance right before it breaks through. When electric lighting appeared, candle makers protested. When smartphones emerged, telecommunications giants tried to lock them down. When streaming replaced DVDs, entire industries claimed it would never catch on. Yet here we are. And now, with personal transportation finally entering the era of true democratization, we stand on the brink of the biggest automotive rebellion since the invention of combustion engine. Whether governments fight it to embrace it or try to tax it into submission, one fact cannot be ignored. The people have seen what's possible. And once freedom is tasted, it cannot be untasted. Wireless, embedded in parking spots. Companies are already testing mobility-as-a-service ecosystems where your vehicle is no longer your possession. It's simply your access past the movement. And once that becomes seamless, ownership itself may start to feel like an outdated burden. After all, why own a depreciating asset when you can summon one? Why buy a vehicle that sits idle 95% of the time when you can activate one only when needed? Suddenly, parking lots shrink, residential garages become storage or living spaces, and the idea of car ownership, once a symbol of independence, transforms into an optional relic of the past. But perhaps the entity with the most to lose and the quietest to respond is the fossil fuel industry. Because while politicians debate regulations and automakers scramble to adjust their strategies, oil executives are staring at spreadsheets filled with a single terrifying trend. Urban fuel consumption is already dropping, and micro-EVs can accelerate that decline exponentially. For decades, oil giants relied on one essential truth, that people must burn fuel to move. But what happens when movement no longer requires combustion? When millions of short trips, school runs, grocery visits, delivery rounds, are silently replaced by compact electric pods sipping mere pennies of electricity? Petrol stations begin to dry up, first in city centers, then in suburbs, until filling a tank becomes as rare and nostalgic as renting a DVD. Even energy companies are now pivoting, try to rebrand themselves as green infrastructure platforms, installing fast chargers where fuel pumps once stood. But the bitter irony remains. The industry that once powered human mobility is now racing to catch up to it. They're no longer leaders. They're becoming followers. And this shift won't just change transportation. It will reshape our cities entirely. Imagine standing in the streets of London in 2030. The air is noticeably cleaner, not from vague policy promises, but from sheer math, quieter, cooler roads filled with tiny EVs instead of roaring diesel vans. Parking spaces are no longer cluttered with oversized SUVs, but replaced with charging pods embedded into sidewalks, where vehicles dock like smartphones. Delivery drones hum above, while compact autonomous shuttles flow like digital arteries beneath, constantly optimized by AI to eliminate traffic snarls before they even form. Children play closer to the streets because the menace of speeding, polluting cars no longer dominates every corner. And the strangest thing is, no one misses the old world. People don't reminisce about choking fumes or overpriced petrol. They don't long for endless maintenance costs or dealership arguments. In fact, they barely remember inconvenience at all, because once a society experiences effortless mobility, it forgets what struggle felt like. And while developed nations cautiously adapt to this new mobility order, something even more extraordinary begins to unfold across developing regions, places once dismissed by legacy automakers as unprofitable markets. In countries across Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, where traditional car ownership has always been out of financial reach for most citizens, these ultra-affordable EVs are not just innovations, they are lifelines. Villages once dependent on infrequent buses now operate shared community EVs, shuttling people to clinics, schools, and markets without waiting hours for unreliable public transport. Delivery services skyrocket as microreverses replace motorcycles and donkey carts. Farmers attach modular utility beds and convert them into portable mills, irrigation carriers, even mobile shops. Energy scarcity, once a crippling limitation, becomes an advantage as homes equipped with basic solar panels begin charging EVs for free sunlight-powered transportation. These nations aren't transitioning from gas to electric. They are skipping an entire century of infrastructure and leaping straight into a post-fuel age. While Western nations debate legislation and cling to nostalgia, emerging economies may very well become the true pioneers of electric mobility, not because they chose to innovate, but because they could not afford to wait. But just when it seems like the future is certain, another question rises like a storm cloud on the horizon. What happens when freedom of movement becomes too powerful for governments to control? Because history shows that whenever technology decentralizes power, institutions react. Will authorities respond with incentives, embracing this change and building supportive infrastructure, or with restrictions, hiding behind safety regulations to slow progress? Will cities impose GPS speed locks on micro-EVs, forcing them into approved routes? Will they introduce mobility taxes for charging at home, or require costly permits to operate shared fleets? The battle for mobility may no longer be fought in factories, but in policy rooms and courtrooms. And in that fight, the people will have to decide, is transportation a commodity or a right? Because once you remove fuel dependency, dealership control, and financial barriers, mobility stops being a privilege. It becomes pure autonomy. And the one thing history has always proven is this. Once humans experience true freedom, they will never return to change willingly. And so, what began as a simple headline, UK unveils $6,399 mini EV, will one day be remembered not as a product launch, but as a spark that ignited a movement bigger than any corporation, government, or industry. A spark that dared to ask, what if mobility didn't belong to the wealthy? What if the ability to move, to explore, to connect belonged to everyone? Some will resist, others will adapt, but most will simply embrace the change, not because it is futuristic, but because it is undeniably better. One day, children will look at noisy petrol cars in museums and laugh at how primitive they were. They will learn that humans once paid fortunes just to go to work. They will hear stories of smoke-filled streets and traffic-choked cities and wonder, why did they tolerate that for so long? And perhaps, in that future, someone will teach them about how everything changed, not with supercomputer, not with a trillion-dollar factory, not with a billionaire speech, but with a tiny, affordable, silent little car that rolled out onto the streets of the UK and whispered, freedom doesn't have to be expensive. That was the moment the world realized the road to the future was never about speed or luxury. It was about access. And once access was granted to all, there was no turning back. The Autotech, where innovation meets the road. The future mobility starts here, only on the Autotech. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like Share and subscribe for more fascinating stories about Elon Musk, Maxwell, Tesla, and the future of innovation. Until next time, keep imagining the impossible